7th of March, and this is Race to Power on WION World is One. Thank you for joining us. I'm Eric Njoka. European and Asian stocks continue to drop in a sign that the market turmoil from President Donald Trump's tariff announcement last week is not letting up. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is in Washington. He will be the first world leader among 50 other nations to negotiate the terms with President Trump. And what's the future of the far-right movement and party in France? And why has Le Pen's case and verdict divided the French? We'll talk to our correspondent from Paris shortly. Welcome to the show. It has only been 5 days since America's tariff war on the world shook up global markets and investor sentiment. While leaders are lining up to negotiate with the US president, and first up on the table is Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Bibi is in Washington on Donald Trump's invitation. Israel's leader is expected to seek a reversal of Trump's tariff. America levied a 17% tariff on Israeli goods on April 2nd. It remains to be seen if the odds will be in Netanyahu's favor, given that Israel is the closest ally and single largest trading partner of the US. The two leaders will be meeting in just a few hours from now. Ahead of his meeting with Trump, Bibi met with U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, setting the tone for trade talks with the American president. Netanyahu is the first leader to reach Washington after Trump announced sweeping tariffs on 185 countries and territories. More such meetings are expected to follow. Since the announcement last week, several leaders have already made their intent clear on negotiating with the U.S. president to get the additional tariff down to zero. Now, according to U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, over 50 countries have begun negotiations with Washington. Japan, Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, Australia, South Korea, and the European Union are among the biggest names that are seeking talks with the Trump administration without implementing retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods. Just moments ago, Japan's Prime Minister spoke to the U.S. president over a phone call to discuss the tariff on Japanese goods. Shigeru Ishiba said that both leaders agreed to hold further discussions and designate cabinet members to continue their talks. Meanwhile, countries like China and Canada have slapped tariffs on American-made goods. China has imposed 34% retaliatory tariff and also placed 11 U.S. companies on an unreliable entities list. Amid election fever, Canada has also imposed 25% tariff on vehicles imported from the U.S., which fall outside the ambit of the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement. In the midst of all the back and forth, markets are witnessing a bloodbath. Economists are predicting a 60% chance of recession in the U.S. However, Donald Trump remains optimistic on his sweeping tariff decision. In his latest post on social media platform Truth Social, Trump says that oil prices and food inflation has decreased. The U.S. president hit out at the federal chief again, pushing for interest rates to be reduced. During a media address again, Trump slammed questions and comments on markets spiraling, saying that the volatility is part of course correction, or, in his own words, a medicine to fix something.
Happen with the market, I can't tell you, but I can tell you our country has gotten a lot stronger. And eventually, it'll be a country like no other. It'll be the most dominant country economically in the world.
Is there pain in the market? At some point, you're unwilling to tolerate this idea of a Trump put. Is there a threshold?
I think your question is so stupid. I mean, I think it's I don't want anything to go down. But sometimes you have to take medicine to fix something.
Well, the administration remains united on the decision to impose reciprocal tariffs. However, many analysts and investors are not in agreement. All right, let's talk to our correspondent in the United States. Susan Teherani is now joining us live from New York. Susan Teherani, good to see you. And let's just talk about the visit by the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to the United States. Susan, if you can hear me. Can you hear me? Just wave.
Yes, I can hear you very well, Eric. Thank you.
Yeah, so let's talk about the visit by the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Apart from the tariffs that will be discussed by the Israeli Prime Minister and the President of the United States, I think the biggest concern is the war in Gaza for the Trump administration.
Absolutely. The war in Gaza is very important. The release of hostages. The Israeli ambassador to the U.S. just in a recent interview here locally said this meeting comes at a critical moment on many key issues. The efforts to return our hostages being held by Hamas, the instability in Syria, and the threats posed by Iranian proxies. The two sides are also expected to talk about Israel-Turkey relations. That, of course, is in relation with Syria and more broadly between the two countries. But yes, you know, as the Prime Minister comes here to talk about tariffs, there's no doubt that the issues in West Asia or the Middle East are also top of the agenda. And of course, what's happening in Gaza.
All right, Susan, probably very quickly, what is the other itinerary for the Israeli Prime Minister while he's in Washington?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
What is the other itinerary for the Prime Minister of Israel while he's in Washington? Very quickly.
He is here with an accompanying delegation. They're going to meet with different branches of the Trump administration for sure. We don't have exact itinerary on what's going to happen at what time, but this afternoon we are expecting a joint press conference between the president and the prime minister. All
right, Susan Tehrani is our correspondent from New York. Susan, we'll have to leave it there. Good to see you. All right, apart from Israel, Japan has also spoken with Trump. The two are among 50 nations world over who are seeking a level playing ground with the US president. So many developments, measures and countermeasures, and the whole debate on reciprocity. Dov Zakhaim is a senior advisor at Center for Strategic and International Studies, is now joining us live on this broadcast. Mr. Dov Zakhaim, markets are on a free fall and Trump is defending his move, telling Americans not to worry, and now he's targeting China. How far do you think Trump is willing to go with this trade war?
I think he'll go quite a bit further for a number of reasons. First, you've got to recognize that Mr. Trump has believed in tariffs for at least 40 years. He doesn't care what the vast majority of economists say, which is that tariffs are essentially a spur to inflation, which ultimately, frankly, would lead to a recession and a deep recession. And that's what they're saying today. And that's why Morgan Stanley now says 60% likelihood. It may well be very much higher than that. Clearly, the stock market doesn't believe Mr. Trump. And the fact that there has been retaliation, which I don't think Mr. Trump expected. I think he expected more reactions like that of Netanyahu, who comes running to the States to beg him not to impose tariffs on Israel when Israel's economy is weak anyway because of the war. That's what he's expected. I don't think he expected China to retaliate. I don't think he expected the EU to retaliate or Canada to retaliate. And quite frankly, it's kind of like what a former Secretary of Defense once said, which was the enemy has a vote. Other countries have a vote. And not all of them are going to come begging. Some will, some won't. But if the big traders, China, the EU, are the ones and Canada, imposing reciprocal tariffs, that is clearly going to not only affect the stock market. And remember, the stock market's not just for rich people. Ordinary Americans invest in what is called 401ks. This is their retirement money. And so when the market goes down as sharply as it does, that means they've got less money for retirement. And that is hurting ordinary Americans. And it's very hard to see how Mr. Trump can convince them that everything will be okay, particularly people who are in retirement or close to retirement. They can't wait for everything to be okay.
Mr. Zakhaim, we see Trump repeatedly saying that this is a good effort by him to save the country. It's a rebirth for America. He continued to insist that this will give Americans the billions that they've been seeking for. If this goes on, what are the ramifications in the long run for America?
Well, clearly we've seen what happened in the 1930s when the world was less interconnected and we imposed tariffs and we had a worldwide depression. Mr. Trump really believes in this, but that's not likely the way it's going to be. I happen to sympathize with the vast majority of economists who worry that if this continues and persists, we will in fact see a very deep recession. And the reason is very simple. People are going to hold off buying new things other than what they absolutely need. They won't buy new cars. They won't buy new appliances. They'll wait, which means inventories will pile up, which means that supply chains will dry up and there'll be unemployment. That could very well happen. Look, I hope Mr. Trump is right. I'm an American. I want my country to be strong. But I'm very, very worried about this.
All right. Dov Zakheim, good to see you. We'll have to leave it there. Thank you for talking to us today.
Thank you for having me.
Barely 3 months in power, and the Trump administration has already made multiple mistakes. One of them includes mistakenly deporting a man living in the U.S. to a prison in El Salvador. A U.S. district judge has issued a scathing opinion against the administration after the immigration officials admitted to having mistakenly deported Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Garcia was among 238 Venezuelans and 23 Salvadorians the Trump administration deported to El Salvador's mega prison, the Center for the Confinement of Terrorism, or CESOT. Judge Paula Sines said Garcia was seized without any lawful authority and held without legal basis in direct contravention of U.S. laws. The district judge further called his situation a grievous error that shocked the conscience and reaffirmed her earlier ruling that demands Garcia to be returned to the U.S. by Monday night. The Justice Department has asked an appeals court to dismiss Judge Sines's order, but Garcia's deportation is just one of a series of mistakes made by the Trump administration. A day ago, several Ukrainian refugees who fled their country after Russia commenced its full-scale invasion were informed in an email that their legal status in the U.S. was revoked. However, soon after, the Department of Homeland Security issued an apology, claiming the mail was sent by mistake or was erroneous. France's political landscape is going through a dramatic turnaround after far-right leader Marine Le Pen's conviction in an embezzlement case. Thousands are out on the streets again, many in support of Le Pen, while there are others who support her conviction. But amid the divide, the national rally leader is determined to fight for her political future. On Sunday, Marine Le Pen addressed her supporters in Paris. The national rally leader told attendees that she will be fighting the court's 5-year ban, which prevents her from running for office. Now, Le Pen will be appealing against the conviction, which courts say might be taken up by 2026 to ensure a timely trial.
We will carry on fighting as we are doing, with discipline and dignity, despite the provocations that will inevitably come our way and which, to the despair of our opponents, we will not give in to.
Le Pen was flanked by National Rally Party leaders including Jordan Bardella, who called for people to mobilize in Le Pen's support. Organizers of the rally say that close to 15,000 people were present there on Sunday.
And so I am only asking one thing from you. Help her. Help her in the face of injustice. Help her by pursuing the mobilization by our side. Help her by amplifying the patriotic wave everywhere in France. Join us.
Joignez-nous.
Gabriel Attal, head of French President Emmanuel Macron's centrist party, on Sunday sought to defend a court ruling against far-right leader Marine Le Pen. On the other hand, left-wing parties and left-leaning groups also rallied on Sunday in an attempt to rebut the far-right's rally. Former Prime Minister Gabriel Attal addressed a gathering supporting the court's decision to convict Le Pen.
Our fight for authority is a fight for the authority of rules. How can we be credible in dealing with juvenile delinquents if politicians don't have to respect the rules? At Renaissance, we're fighting to get back to basics. As you said, Ambroise, you break, you fix, you dirty, you clean. We also say, you suffer, we take care of you. But that can't hold if exemplarity isn't everywhere. So I say, you steal, you pay, especially when you're a politician.
The courts convicted Le Pen and several others from the party of misappropriating European Union funds. In effect, Le Pen is guilty of using EU money to pay party officials. There is still time for the presidential elections in France, with polls due to be held in 2027. The big question now is, will Marine Le Pen's trial be a make or break moment for France's far right? Let's talk to our correspondent in France. Ross Cullen is now joining us live in Paris. Ross Cullen, good to see you. What's the future of the far-right party in France, given the contradictory or the contradicting rallies that were held yesterday? Has anything changed?
Nothing has really changed in terms of the rallies that were held on Sunday. It was a chance for the hard right party, the National Rally, to try to come together and show that they are still united with their more than 100 MPs seated behind Jordan Bardella, seated behind Marine Le Pen, the two star speakers for that party at their rally. But because they announced this political gathering, there was a chance for the centrists led by Gabriel Attal, Emmanuel Macron's party, to hold a gathering. There was also a chance for the left-wing opposition to hold a rally, so all three taking place on Sunday at the same time pretty much in three different locations in the French capital. Around 7,000 people at the National Rally gathering, according to police, around 5,000 people gathering in the famous Republic Square, Place de la République, for the left-wing gathering, where notably Marine Tondelier, the leader of the Green Party, spoke. It was interesting to note a poll that was carried out over the weekend, assuming that Marine Le Pen won't be able to run in the 2027 presidential election, and assuming that the National Rally's party president, her young 29-year-old protege Jordan Bardella, would be the replacement for her. The poll assumed that he will be running for the National Rally, and it returned pretty much the same results as if Marine Le Pen were running, showing that Jordan Bardella would be finishing in first place in the first round with around 35% of the vote, more or less what Marine Le Pen would get if she were running. So that shows there's no real impact on the National Rally's campaign if Marine Le Pen remains convicted, and if, despite her appeal in 2026, if the sentence remains reapplied and therefore they have to look to somebody else like Jordan Bardella. That shows there's no major impact at this stage on the support for the National Rally. Of course, people like Gabriel Attal, the former Prime Minister, will be hoping to position his party, the centrist party, as the response to the far right's strength in the elections. And we will also hear from the left wing, of course, over the coming months, over the next couple of years, as the presidential campaign hots up. We won't have to wait a full 2 years for our first main picture of the state of France going forward in terms of the election landscape, because in 2026 there'll be municipal elections, including for the mayor of Paris, because the current incumbent, Anne Hidalgo, is standing down.
All right, Ross Cullen, we'll have to leave it there. Good to see you. Thank you for talking to us today. Turkey is going through its biggest political churn in a decade. The country's Republican People's Party is looking to capitalize on sympathy following the arrest of former Istanbul Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu. Despite a government crackdown, the Republican People's Party, also known as CHP, is stepping up pressure on Erdogan to call elections. In the absence of İmamoğlu, party chairperson Özgür Özil is leading the charge against the incumbent president. While addressing a party congress, Özil challenged Erdogan to call early elections and face İmamoğlu in polls.
Tayyip Erdogan, who loves warm halls. Are you ready for the field of contest? Are you ready for the squares? Bring the ballot box, let's compete. Bring the ballot box, let's compete. If you have the courage, we want our candidate beside us and the ballot box in front of us. Bring it on.
Oscar Ozil is an old CHP warhorse and is also a vice president of Socialist International, an organization that promotes solidarity and dialogue among the global left. 51-year-old Ozil began his political career from his hometown in Manisa in western Turkey. He ran an unsuccessful campaign for the office of mayor of Manisa in 2009. 2 years later, in 2011, he entered Turkey's parliament from his home seat. He has retained that post in all successive elections to date. Electoral success in parliamentary polls elevated him to the position of chairperson of the CHP in 2023. He was re-elected to this post during recent party congress in Ankara. Ozil is confident that his party will be able to dethrone Erdogan, who remains a top executive of the country since 2003. Imamoglu's arrest on graft charges has given the opposition a weapon to pose its biggest political challenge to Erdogan. Tens of thousands of people have since taken to the streets of Istanbul and other cities across Turkey. South Korea is heading to snap elections. A 60-day countdown to presidential polls has begun after the country's constitutional court upheld the impeachment of former President Yoon Suk-yeol on Friday. With the constitutional court verdict ending Yoon Suk-yeol's 4-month impeachment saga, all focus now shifts to elections. South Korea's constitution mandates fresh elections within 60 days of the president's removal from office. The constitutional court delivered its verdict on 4th of April, effectively setting the deadline of election to 3rd of June. A final call on the election date will be taken by the acting president, Han Duck-soo. Meanwhile, all the political parties are now scrambling to prepare for elections. The race to power for South Korea will be played out mainly between People Power Party, that was earlier led by Yoon Suk-yeol, and Democratic Party of Korea. Latest projections show that Democratic Party leader Lee Jae-myung is polling ahead of the People Power Party leader Han Dong-hun. Along with the presidential vote, South Korea is also expected to vote on a constitutional reform proposed by Speaker Woo Won-shik. The proposed amendment will be significant as it will limit presidential powers while paving the way for re-election as president for one more term. A survey conducted by Gallup Korea last month found 54% supporting constitutional revision to fix the presidential system. Brazil is witnessing massive rallies as ex-president Jair Bolsonaro tries to rally support for himself. The 70-year-old is facing charges of plotting a coup 2 years ago. Bolsonaro headed a massive demonstration on Sunday, calling on his supporters to protest against Supreme Court's charges against him. Close to 45,000 people attended the rally.
Only a psychopath would say that what happened on January 8, 2023 was an armed attempt at a military coup. I'm in their way. If they think I'm going to give up, that I'm going to run away, they're wrong.
Bolsonaro is demanding amnesty for those who have been convicted of an attack in Brasilia in January 2023. 2 years ago, thousands of Bolsonaro supporters stormed the presidential palace, Congress and Supreme Court, calling for President Lula da Silva's ouster from power. Bolsonaro will now face trial on coup charges. If convicted, he faces a potential 40-year prison term. The ex-president is rallying his supporters in an attempt to sidestep the trial so that he can contest elections again next year. Now, in a moment that added some unexpected action to the election campaign, Australia's opposition leader Peter Dutton accidentally kicked an Australian rules football into a cameraman during a stop at Palmerston. The ball struck the cameraman's forehead, leaving him with an injury. Take a look. And that's the latest on this edition of Race to Power on WION The World is One. Thank you for watching.
Busting the myths around tokenization, catch me on Token Money Magnet, only on WION.
WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe,